Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek, Episode 69, Voyager, Season 5, Episode 6, Timeless.
They found us. Choquete,
Go ahead.
Starfleet's on an intercept course. It's now or never.
We're on our way.
If you're having doubts, let me know. I'll take your program offline. But if you're with us, we tempt fate together.
To aid an honorable thief, or to spend eternity in cybernetic oblivion. Let's tempt fate.
My name is Dan Glaubitz. That's not even a real voice. When people, this is my new voice. I can't even do it that well because it's not real. I only do real voices.
Sounds to me good day. Sounds to me like we're warmed up and ready to go.
Totally.
Star Trek Voyager.
Star Trek.
Voyager.
Wait. Shh.
Okay, hold on, everybody, because Dan is back.
I'm back
Dan is back.
on my adventures through time and space.
Back from the secret mission.
Secret mission.
On my 2-week mission.
He was not captured by the enemy.
No,
Or
but
if he was tortured and turned, and he's playing us for fools.
His forelight.
Well, I traveled through time by going to the center of the sun and spinning around counterclockwise while going faster than light. I went forward and backward through time at the same time.
Did you go to like 1984?
I went to 7020A.
If you went forward and backward at the same time, would you
Yeah.
just be in the present?
Well, it depends by how much each way, I guess.
Fair point.
But it's all simultaneous. Isn't that what quantum? It's a quantum state.
Totally.
I was in a quantum state. I was in two things at the same. I was in a quantum state. I was in a temporal quantum state. I was in a temporally quantum state. I was in two things at the same time.
You were and you weren't.
I was and I wasn't. Oh my god. It was a fourth dimensional.
You like that,
It was a fifth dimensional
like that
temporal quantum state.
I'm glad you caught your error there because the fourth dimension is time.
Yeah,
guy's
that would have been redundant.
For real?
Well, yeah. Well, I was and I wasn't. That's some meta, like, quantum state. Speaking of which, how many times in the episode did they say the word temporal? This is a quiz mode. I'm jumping.
Quiz mode.
I don't know.
I was gonna.
How many times did they? Oh, by the way, real quick.
We should start the episode properly.
This
right?
is It's got Star Trek. It's
This is
timeless.
timeless.
It's Voyager, season 5, episode 6, which weirdly is the same.
100th episode of Voyager.
Because last week, this is episode 69 of It's Got Star Trek. Last week was I know. Last week was episode 68, and we did the.
That's even funnier.
We did Trials and Tribulations, and that was Deep Space Nine, season 5, episode 6.
Oh, that's right.
So you numerologists out there, have fun with this.
Have fun.
Because this is Voyager, season 5, episode 6, not done on purpose.
Oh yeah.
Not consciously done on purpose.
You know, that's why we were getting silent. It's because I was going to say Star Trek Voyager after the silence, and then I totally fucked up.
And this
forgot.
was the 100th.
So it's good you remembered
episode of
that.
Voyager.
It's good that you remember that, Patrick.
69th episode of It's Got Star Trek, 100th episode of Voyager. That's what we were talking about. And
That's all we've talked
And Dan, what were you on about? You were on about something about time travel?
I was talking about a temporally quantum state.
Good.
A temporally quantum state. It was because
How many times? You asked us how many times.
You
Because it was-
were
they said
and you
temporal.
weren't.
Because I was in two places at the same time as I was and I wasn't, and I went forward and backwards through time in the sixth dimension. That's stupid. Sixth dimension. Forget I said. That's
That sounds
stupid.
like quite a ride.
That's stupid.
According to string theory, there could be anywhere between 11 and 12 dimensions.
Whoa, somewhere
Yeah.
between 11 and 12.
And there
Possibly more.
When you get up into those, they start talking about like bubble cells bumping against each other. That's the universe. The universe is bubble cells.
Very
or something.
difficult to prove empirically. String
Yeah.
theory. It is. Hopefully, they'll get around that. Maybe they've started developing some ideas for experiments.
Well, so I was going to do this quiz near the end, but maybe I'll just throw
Temporal.
in the question.
Let's flip it and reverse it.
Can I finish? Sorry, that was terrible.
Were you trying to do Connor Trip Tucker?
No, that was Dana
Perot.
Dana Carvey doing Ross Perot or something.
Oh, Dana Carvey doing Ross Perot as
Yeah.
opposed to Dana Carvey doing
Bush.
Charles Trip Tucker III.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. Okay, so I have a bunch of words, and how many times they say them. I'm just going to throw one out there. Temporal. How many times they say temporal in this
11.
episode? Jesse?
3.
The correct answer is 7.
Huh.
Oh, that's
7.
less than I would have expected,
Yeah.
given the nature of the episode.
I got
We guessed numbers that were 4 away from 7.
Yeah, you both did. So I have more, but maybe we should move on to the episode.
Why don't you sprinkle them throughout the podcast episode?
Yeah.
That's going to keep people listening
That'll keep them listening.
past all this initial nonsense.
It's the hook, yeah.
People will be like,
all
okay, this is getting a little silly and ridiculous, but I want to hear the next quiz from Dan.
And right when they're like, "Oh man, I'm bored. There's no quiz. I'm gonna believe this podcast, man, because I'm bored." And then I'll say, "Hey, how many times did they say this word?" And they'll say this word is two
cleverly
words.
elided the word from that example.
This word is.
You risked saying one of the words, and
I
then you would
almost
have felt
did.
obligated to say the response.
I would have. This is another moment when I had a joke that I was making.
Did I walk on your joke
No,
again?
it wasn't. No, it was fine because it wasn't
Have
a really
I
good
trod
joke.
upon your joke again, sir?
My joke was that I was saying, because I almost said one of the words like you said I did.
Yes.
Instead, I said this word, and then I was going to say, well, that's actually 2 words. And then so it wasn't,
It's a form of joke.
That's
Technically, it has all the pieces.
Slightly amusing.
0 is a percent.
All right.
So there was quantum slipstream drives throughout this episode. There
Is that
was
a
one
clue
in
to
particular.
the other word?
No, I was just saying like this is my quantum segue.
All right.
Well, could you imagine a quantum segue? What would that even mean?
You mean like what Joe Bluth drives around on?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So before
You shut that down pretty quick.
before we get started, we're getting started into. Don't worry, Dan's back, so we're all good. Timeless. We'll be discussing that in a moment. We have, just like last week, we have
got
another
feedback?
We have another totally real listener letter. This one reads, "Dear the It's Got Star Trek podcast, congratulations on your upcoming 69th episode." In parentheses, it says 69. Haha. My question is, given the depth of lore that has been built up over the past 5.5 decades of the Star Trek franchise, which unanswered question or dangling thread do you think needs to be answered in an on-screen canonical fashion? And why is it whether or not Klingons have 2 buttholes? Sincerely, Rembrandt Hammerschmidt, who lives in San Martin de los Andes, Argentina.
Well, they have 2 buttholes because they have backups of everything, right?
Yeah, Jesse and I mentioned that last week because there was another letter writer who also that was the question he asked.
Yeah.
So this letter writer might be
He said bumholes.
parroting.
Are
Yeah, he
these-
did say bumholes.
These are
We said buttholes.
totally real letter writer.
100%.
Okay.
What this one's from a fella named Rembrandt Hammerschmidt
In
who lives
Argentina or something?
in San Martin de los Andes.
Oh, yeah.
That other guy's name was
Argentina.
Worcestershire.
The other guy was named Johnny Worcestershire. Another 100% real letter from a 100% real listener.
Do you think
yeah.
do you think Uruguayans feel self-conscious
Uruguay?
because they're just like
Uruguay.
little Argentinians? I mean, not physically in stature, but I mean just
You mean
like
the size of the country?
yeah, they're just like Argentina, but they're Uruguay. You know.
I'm not familiar enough with the geography, culture, or people, or government styles to understand.
I think
That's more like
Is
a
there
Jimmy
a
joke.
stereotype that they are similar?
I think the deal is Uruguay is kind of like
Is
you know-
Uruguay like the New Zealand of Argentina?
well, New Zealand. It's so hard to say because we know so much more about New Zealand now that we're able
It's not
to.
hard to say. It's Uruguay.
I'm saying that it's hard to say because we know so much more about New Zealand now because of like Fly the Conchords and the Bushwhackers and Young Einstein.
Young Einstein was
First of all, Young Einstein was
Oh, no, it's Australian.
And
Shit,
second
I
of all,
fucked up.
was Yahoo Serious.
I was like, I fucked my own shit up. It shows what I know.
I love the omission. I love the omission that the
Lord of the Rings?
It's no longer no mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
I walked over your joke that time.
You just walked-
This is a battle. You started a battle,
You didn't
bro.
walk over my joke. You came and grabbed my joke, and you fucking stomped on its
Yeah.
neck and laughed at it.
See how it feels, man?
I do. I kind of dug it.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad you liked it. Anyways.
All right, that's the end of real listener letters.
but-
Argentina.
But
Uruguay.
I was going to say Uruguay. We don't know much about it. We know more about New Zealand. I'm just heard from an Uruguayan, that it's similar to Argentina.
Okay, all right.
But I'm sure it's like way different. And I offended a million people, and I'm not sorry. I don't know.
What we'll do?
I could say I'm sorry, but who fucking cares?
We'll check our statistics over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see if there's a downturn in the number of Uruguayan, or indeed Argentinian, or indeed any other person who might have an opportunity to be offended by your.
I don't want to make
your
anyone
anecdote.
an anecdote about an Uruguayan I once met.
I'm intensely curious now, and after we finish the podcast, I'm going to get on Wikipedia and learn everything I can about Uruguay, Argentina, Ecuador, and
Ecuador. It's Ecuador.
I think that's it. I think that I'll keep it at those three.
And Bolivia's crazy because like Bolivia's just like stuck right in the middle of South America.
That goes without saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't even get us started on Colombia.
Bolivianos.
Yeah.
They don't call them that. That's probably offensive too.
Bolivianos?
I don't want to make anyone feel bad, so I really don't. But
all of this is.
I also don't want to be like one of those people that's like, hey, if you can't deal with a funny joke, then go fuck yourself.
What about an unfunny joke?
No, I said have a sense of humor, Patrick. It was funny because I'm telling you it is.
It was funny.
Yeah.
I'll agree to that. So, Timeless, Star Trek Voyager. It's an episode.
Oh, you had a question, but you did have a question there about like, what was the loose thread that never got closed or something?
Yeah. Were there any loose threads that, you don't have to answer now. Could be later. But, there's a lot of little dangling participles here and there.
Yeah.
I mean, Kirk had a brother at one point.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that?
I don't know.
Whatever happened to Cybok? I mean, we know what happened to, but like,
I am Cybot.
I want to know more about Cybok.
I am Cybot.
Or the other,
I am a cybernetic
the other Will
organism.
Riker. The other Will Riker.
Yeah, Thomas Riker.
What happened to Tom? What happened to Doohan? Billy Doohan, who they found and he through the transporter, and he drank scotch with Picard.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, he went off to do his. Who knows? You're right. It's a good point.
He stayed on that Dyson sphere.
Did he hang out at the Dyson sphere?
All by himself on the Dyson sphere?
I don't know. Maybe that's where they found
I don't think
him,
he stayed on the Dyson. Yeah, they found him at the Dyson sphere.
Yeah, no, he did go to somewhere else.
Does synthahol get you drunk? Have we decided that yet?
We keep
We don't know.
Because in Voyager, it got 7 of 9 drunk, and she had to.
And was it synthahol that she was drinking? We presume it was. Because that's usually what they're drinking, but they're also always.
No, they said synthahol.
Did they say synthahol?
The doctor said synthahol, and he had to give her some.
That was a really great part.
Yeah,
cute.
he had to give her some inaprovaline to like sober her up. So
Inappropriate.
Like, we are as
Olean.
one.
Did you know inaprovaline?
one.
Inaprovaline was a synaptic stimulant and cardiostimulant.
Is it a real thing or is it a fake thing?
It worked by fortifying the cell membranes and could be used as a preventative measure
The way you're talking sounds like it's a fake thing that they invented for Star Trek.
or in response to various physical illnesses.
Sounds like you're putting us on, Dan.
Chloromadride.
You putting us on?
Chloromadride, does that sound like I'm reading? Chloromadride was a stronger version of inaprovaline. In 2151, while exploring an uncharted M-class planet.
On this episode, Dan reads Memory Alpha.
Yeah, well, I think we got to the sentence that proves that this is not real. In 2151, while exploring an uncharted M-class
It could be
planet.
real. You don't know yet.
Yeah, it
hasn't happened.
Hey, I got dates
But
for you.
they mentioned this is fucking Memory Alpha of talking about Jean-Luc Picard. So.
Well, here's a date for you. November 18th, 1998. How is that significant?
Somebody's birthday.
No, it's the day this episode airs.
Oh,
On
okay.
UPN.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, now you know.
How many times did they say quantum in this episode? How many times did they say quantum in this episode?
I don't
13.
know.
Lucky 13.
Jesse?
I don't know. I don't remember them saying.
11.
Ah, it was closer that time.
You were much better that time.
I'm going to get on the prize wheel soon.
So, Voyager,
okay, who was this written by? It was written by Brendan Braga.
Brendan Braga. I was going to say that. I was going to say.
And
Minoski.
And
Joe
and Joe.
Menosky.
It was directed by LeVar Burton.
Damn right. It was directed by LeVar
Fucking
Burton.
Captain Geordi of the USS Challenger, which
Captain
looked just like the
LaForge.
Enterprise. It
Yeah,
looked-
it was a
a
Galaxy.
Galaxy class. And that same ship shows up in Endgame, which is not the Avengers Endgame, but the Voyager Endgame, at the end of Voyager. And Challenger is presumably named after the Space Shuttle Challenger, which itself was named after
there's a British ship
the
called
HMS Challenger, but it was the 5th HMS Challenger. I looked this up
Word.
on the internet, and the 5th HMS Challenger was the one that went on that grand global tour where they navigated like 68,000 nautical miles over, I forget, 4 or 5 years or something. And they found what is now known as the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest point in the oceans, in the whatever you call the aquatosphere,
in the Pacific?
or whatever. Yeah. And it's at the bottom of the Marianas Trench,
Yeah.
basically. So it's the deepest point of the Marianas Trench.
The oceans are just like space, man. It's like space. It's like that's the real final frontier, man. You don't even know what's down there.
You don't even
man.
know what's under that.
You don't know what's at the bottom of the ocean. They try to go, and the submarine always breaks when it gets too much pressure.
Always.
And they have to.
There's
and they-
100% fatality
that-
rate for submarine.
the glass in the meter breaks, and they have to go back up.
It gets all spider webby.
Yeah, it gets all spider webby. And also, they went to an L-class planet instead of
Yeah.
an M-class planet. It was an
L-class.
ice planet. It was
L-class is for low temperature.
Yeah, that I like the colors when the first shot of the Voyager flying by, or was it the shuttle flying by? I know it was Voyager because they were checking it out. Or no, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
it was probably shuttle, but it doesn't matter.
It was probably the Delta Flyer.
The Delta Flyer, yeah. And there was a nice, cool blue like space shot of the planet, and I thought that looked really neat. Although the landing was tolerable, it looked pretty dated.
See, I thought the opposite.
You thought it looked?
I thought it looked great, even like being so old. What an interesting early controversy to have.
Well, I think
They did it in 2 weeks, apparently. They used baking soda mixed with CGI.
Whoa, that's kind of cool.
The baking soda was the snow.
Okay.
as the Voyager is belly flopping.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? I don't know. A difficulty with Voyager is obviously we're stuck with not only with SD versions, but the kind of SD that doesn't do well on streaming, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's all blocky.
This would be better to watch on an old CRT TV back on November 18th, 1998.
When this episode first aired.
Precisely.
Well, if you listen to the first part I said, and you probably did, I said it looked okay. Maybe I didn't stress that enough. I was like, this looks okay, and it's good for its time, but I think standing back and just seeing it surrounded for what it was, I'm saying it looks dated now. That's not a criticism necessarily, because back then it was pretty cool. But
Back then they were making CGI with rocks and sticks,
yeah,
banging them together until CGI came out.
it was called gravel imaging.
You just mix some coal and gravel together, you stomp
Yeah.
them up until an image comes out.
Turns into something.
You just start eating that out with a spoon until you get images in your mind.
Yeah, your mind.
see what you see.
So, yeah, that was. It looked kind of janky, but it was fine.
I think
it
there's
reminded me of Babylon 5 a little bit for some reason.
I do find it interesting because I saw a similar set of divergent opinions, and is two totally valid perspectives. To me, I was thinking when I saw that, it reminded me in so many ways of a scene, and I won't go into details for those who haven't seen the third season of Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, but there is a scene with a similar scenario, which is of course done with modern...
A scene with a similar scenario.
Was it the overnight scenario?
Sort of, yeah. There's like a ship sitting on some ice, and there's a bunch of ice, and the ship kind of has to crash land on the ice.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking
it's
about.
like the same kind of thing, except,
thought that
except
looked-
those people survive.
Are you saying now? Are we still talking about the quality of the coal gravel imaging, or are we saying? Like,
I just meant it evoked. Having
yeah, I
seen
see
that
that.
recently on Discovery, it was an interesting parallel because it was a similar situation where a ship is attempting to crash land on
I
an
got
ice
you.
planet, the ice planet of Hoth.
I got you. Ice planet. Yeah.
Yeah.
When they first went inside Voyager, Harry, Kim, and Choquete when we first saw them go in, why did they go in? Because this wasn't 15 years ago. That first scene in the episode wasn't 15 years ago.
It was 15 years in the future. That's in the future. They finally find Voyager.
So wait.
They were looking for a long time. They didn't know what had happened to it, and then they found it on the ice planet.
Okay, yeah. So
that's old Harry, old Choquete.
That's old Harry. Yeah,
Old angry Harry.
And Tessa.
Right. So what I was wondering,
Completely useless.
useless, and there were some bad.
We'll get to that.
lines.
We'll
There's-
get to the relationship part in a second, and the value
Yeah.
or not of that.
So I was saying, I was not suggesting that the first scene was either in the future or the beginning, the past. I was going to say it's not in the future or the past. It was in somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's not in the middle. It's the beginning of what we're seeing happen.
So why did they go back after 15 years or whatever to?
They didn't know where it was. So the deal is
They found it 15 years prior, didn't they?
no. It's confusing.
It is confusing
because there was a lot of discussion when you read the behind the scenes stuff about making this into a two-parter. And I tend to agree with the ultimate decision was not to stretch into a two-parter. Garrett Wang, who plays Harry Kim, he was really keen on making a two-parter. Some people were arguing for that to kind of
really went for that
spread the story out a little bit.
He really went for that role.
He did. I think I forget if it was Brandon Braga who somebody felt really strongly about saying like it's good if you stretch it out, it's going to not work as well. It works better as sort of a city on the edge of forever style, very specific, self-contained little story.
And I was actually really like into watching the episode. I didn't want to say enraptured because I wasn't like what's a word that's somewhere in between where I don't know. I was really drawn in to the episode. I was watching
you were
it
engrossed in the episode.
Engrossed. There you go. I was engrossed. I enjoyed the episode. I thought it was good.
You were merely engrossed. You were not trying to ingratiate yourself to the episode.
I was already engrossed. Whereas and I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Can go on.
I was just saying that what the base, it takes a little bit to untangle because the plot is pretty innovative, I should say, for a time travel story, given that it's a time travel story where there's no actual time travel. There's just sending a message. So that is a cool thing, and I think they do a good job with it. But this is also that time. Voyager has always had this issue, but particularly as it went on, there is so much technobabble in this episode. An extreme amount of technobabble on top of technobabble.
And B'Elanna had like the most sort of like heartfelt, balls out, or I should say, bold delivery of some technobabble.
It's an understandable evolution, and I think we've discussed this in the past of the technobabble getting built up over time. And so by the point of Voyager, I mean, they're really piling it on. I can also see, well, as a Star Trek fan, I could follow most of it. That's not the issue. The issue is almost like that it can become exclusionary. I could see that being a problem for new fans trying to get into a story, and they're talking about quantum slipstreams, messing with the warp fields and all this other stuff.
So that was the part. First of all, we've decided that in the behind the scenes stuff, you were, and watching the episode, you're saying
basically, I think that because they didn't stretch it out,
well, no,
because that would have its own problems. We didn't get as much explanation as clear for the timeline. But when you watch it a couple times, it seems that what happens is they develop this thing, they test it out, think it's going to work. It doesn't. So Voyager falls out of the slipstream and ends up crashing on the planet. Meanwhile, the Delta Flyer that was flying ahead with Harry Kim and Choquete, they're stuck in the slipstream, so they make it all the way back to the Alpha Quadrant and to Earth. And then over the course of the following 15 years is when Garrett Wang, Harry Kim is all talking about, like, I talked to all these admirals and no one will help us. And then they stopped searching for you guys because they didn't have enough data to know that where Voyager was when it fell out of the slipstream. They had already lost their communications link. They lost their telemetry data.
So there were just two times. It was
2375 and then 2390.
So they had just found out that they had just confirmed what they probably suspected, which is the crew is dead. They had just basically confirmed that.
Basically. So that's one reason why they're kind of creeped out when they get there, even though I'm sure they assumed that was likely the case because they never heard back from them. But yeah, so that's the timeline. And I think it is helpful before going through the plot and sort of discussing it is to understand that, that's what happens. Voyager falls out of the slipstream, they crash on a planet, and then Choquete, etc. They work until the point in time that we're now watching in the future time period in 2390. They've developed this plan to send a message back in time in order to correct it.
So the line that I was the B'Elanna line, which you actually kind of referenced already through that, is that basically Harry Kim is explaining that he's going to take the Delta Flyer and surf out and ride the rapids out in front of them. And, he's explaining that, and her response is like, she just like really goes for it. And it's like, they could map the threshold of the Slipstream as it's forming and send the phase corrections back to us. That's a great idea, Harry.
She all like walks behind Janeway and is all like starts like waving her hands around.
Yeah,
I love B'Elanna, but it was a somewhat awkward scene. I guess they were just trying to give her a line.
It was an excited B'Elanna, which is in stark contrast to the one where she was like battling depression. But
it's cool that she gave credit to Harry, because the way she was behaving until she thanked Harry was the kind of thing like you deal with at the office, where you say like, well, what if we thought about, and then they're like, yeah, we could do this and that, and it was like, well, that's my idea, dude.
Yeah, right.
You just totally took my idea.
Totally gave it to him. So yeah, she's an honorable person. But I don't understand the explanation really, because they're saying the phase variances wouldn't affect the... So the shuttle's going to ride this rapids, going to send back like adjustments as they ride the thing.
Because they'll see them first, and they'll say, doot.
But they're saying the phase variances wouldn't affect the shuttle as much as it would Voyager. If anything, it would be the opposite. Those phase variances would... Because this Delta Flyer is smaller, how is this shuttle supposed to get through those if the fucking giant Voyager can't?
I think this is one of the issues with the over-reliance on Technobabble. I think because, as we've argued many times in the past, it's ridiculous to pay too much attention to these things, because these are storytelling vehicles in the end, right? So yeah, that point aside, that we agree and appreciate with the philosophy that Star Trek is an entertainment program telling good tales.
Okay,
that aside, if you have too much nonsense in it, it starts to drag attention away from that story you're trying to tell.
Right.
Now, I thought they did do a good job with Janeway at the end when she's like, well, when it comes to orbital mechanics, I say, don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
That's the writers saying that, and that's awesome.
And that's that there were actually two examples I saw of basically them sort of winking at the audience about time travel episode. One was when Harry... at the very end, when Harry like tries to call Voyager back in time and it gets messed up the first time, then the doctor goes like, "I'm not a time travel expert, but can't we just call Voyager again? Because that's like the ultimate thing. Is can't you just do it again?" He's like, "The past isn't going anywhere, So that's kind of like a wink to the audience. It's like, yeah. And then
it's like the Back to the Future where Marty goes back in time 10 minutes before, as opposed to like a couple days before.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. And then Kim's response was like, they're just kind of throwaway. It's like, it's not going to help if we don't know what to tell them. And it was just kind of like, whatever.
That is one of the flaws and this is the type of flaw happy to ignore. Just like Back to the Future, it doesn't bother me because it's telling a story. But the thing about why not send why not send the message back why not tell them to not even bother building this thing? Or if you want to at least give them that 10 years that they ended up getting, why don't you send a message back saying like, look, just turn it on for like a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the other question is like, okay, you've now dismantled this, but it works for a little bit.
I guess the only thing...
Can't you just do like multiple little bits?
Well, Harry kind of tricked Harry when he sent the... Well, he tricked Harry via Janeway. Everyone was confused. Well, Harry sent 7 of 9 the codes, but he sent the wrong codes. So he tricked them. And so that was the thing, is like, he didn't have to ask anyone. Future Harry didn't have to ask any permission, because he just tricked them with like, bad coordinates that they thought were legit, so it's not like they had to be like, hey, had to convince anyone of anything, but they could have tricked them in the past.
And here's an alternative, right? Because, and I think this is where you sometimes run into issues with Brandon Braga's stories, which I think he's amazing at coming up with really interesting high concept sci-fi stories. They tend to work best when he's partnered with somebody else like Joe Menosky or Ron Moore, that he wrote a lot of stuff with, because he lacks some of those. He relies on the Technobabble solutions a lot, and sometimes in ways that even force credulity within the Star Trek universe. And then when you try to think of simple alternatives that might have still been dramatically interesting or more dramatically interesting, what if they could send a message back to 7 and they're just trying to tell her, like, don't don't use this. And then part of the story becomes Seven in this strange position where she's trying to convince, instead of it like as it's played out, which is like, oh, this is obviously Harry Kim. Okay, we've all figured it out. We totally trust this information. What if they didn't trust it because it's 7 of 9 and she's getting Borg messages and they maybe are like, is she telling the truth? They could have done an angle along those lines and had some drama in there. And it would have been a little bit more interesting, I think, than sending a message twice. And both of those messages right within minutes of them dying.
I agree that would be an interesting plot point, but then you're talking about stretching it out into a two-parter at that point. Unless they could definitely cut out some stuff between Choquete and Tessa. And this episode was heavily expository. Where Harry was really, it's like Choquete was there talking to Tessa, and her role was like he was dumping his sort of future emotions, and then the Doctor's role was to handle Harry's exposition.
Yeah, because he's like, so what happened when you got back to Earth?
Yeah, so the Doctor was put there as a tool for Harry, and Tessa was a tool for Choquete. But her lines were pretty bad sometimes.
Yeah,
like the first one that like kind of noticed is when they were like talking in the Voyager. And she's like, your heart will always be here on Voyager. That's where you belong. Who knows? Maybe we'll meet someday. And he says, what if we don't? She's like, then I'll miss you all the same. And at that point, I'm just like, I don't know. But then when their fucking Geordi is chasing them and like they're on the ship trying to fight Choquete and her together, trying to fight Geordi, she goes, they're gaining on us. 200,000 kilometers in closing. You call these evasive maneuvers? And it's just like, it was really bad. Yeah. And
it's made worse because the special effects, as decent as they were at this stage, the shot was of a steady Galaxy class ship chasing after a steady Delta flyer.
Yeah, that's true. It didn't sell it for her. I didn't help her sell it.
It didn't look like evasive maneuvers.
Yeah.
And this is after Deep Space Nine has already been doing much more interesting stuff. And so has Voyager, by the way.
Yeah, they should have done the whole move around thing where they fall around.
But I agree with you on the Tessa thing. Again, overall, these are a number of fun little nitpicks to talk about because overall I found the story is like really fun and interesting.
I did. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I thought the story was good. I thought Garrett Wang did like a really good job with like the old Harry.
See, I'm kind of torn about that because
I didn't like some of the expository dialogue though.
Yeah,
I thought that the portrayal of a sterner Harry was good. I thought it was nice that we got to see the guilt that's driving him, see the origin of the guilt that's driving him, because we don't always get to see that in these types of stories. Sometimes we see a character who is clearly driven by guilt and motivated by guilt, but we don't necessarily get a full picture of what led to it. But in this context, we kind of get that idea a little bit more. On the other hand, some of it came off as a little weird because it was expository and he's talking to the Doctor and it's sort of like yelling a lot. And I don't know, it was not perfect.
I thought I liked, so there were two scenes of Harry freaking out basically. One was more intense in the future and one was in the past and I thought the one in the past, because Harry is normally kind of this kind of bland character, but the one in the past,
and cheery and kind of,
he's fine.
He's green. He's a green guy.
Yeah. So when he was in the past, when he started panicking, when like the phase variances were off, when they were showing that whole situation with the slipstream go down, I thought that was really good because at first he's like do, and then you can
super confident.
Yeah, and you can sort of see him be like get a little more panicked. The one in the future is just like fucking like you have 3 minutes left and you're wasting 1 minute crying to the Doctor, and it seems so intense and like what was one of the well, you were talking about him yelling at the Doctor, and he's he kind of over, like some of the lines were like, all the way back to Earth, we got home, Doc, and all it took was killing everyone we cared about. Starfleet certainly took their time finding us. And
Thanks a lot, Ensign Kim.
When did Ensign Kim start saying Doc? Like, did he always say Doc in the past?
I don't know.
I don't know. And then, but there
I don't have a specific recollection of that.
But
maybe.
There was a joke about salami sandwiches that was kind of lame.
Yeah,
it was lame. I enjoyed it personally because it was lame.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Choquete's delivery was pretty good because I did a double take, kind of like, did he say lunch? But then he's like salami sandwiches, and I was like, oh, okay.
and your mileage will vary, but I think that what they're doing and I think they did well. Some people will probably argue, and quite validly, that it's a bit overwrought, was in differentiating old Harry and young Harry in behavior and appearance and how he holds himself. And so that salami joke, I sort of recognize that as this is where they're making that example of Harry as this sort of cheery, banal, like, oh, okay, I'll go along with it. Yeah. And then old Harry is like, fuck you.
Yeah. Okay. So when
I go by Harry now.
So when the doctor's like, at least you weren't buried under 20 meters of ice, and he's like, you don't know how many times I wished I was. And I was like, that was fucking dark, man.
It was dark. This is a dark episode.
That was so like,
Dark Harry.
Yeah, I liked that. I was like, that was really good because it was just like, fuck.
That was good. And, I think the overall structure and presentation of the episode, I think is largely good, but there are these things that pop out, like the technobabble. Like, I think the scenes with Harry where he's all upset are somewhat undercut by the background knowledge that just is sitting in the back of your head that you're like, well, you can send the message to like 10 days before they turn on them. I think that's
why he
in there.
never made lieutenant.
Yeah, well, then there's that. There's that. I know it's a joke. It's a long running joke about the whole Harry Kim never gets promoted above ensign. But in this episode, it's particularly acute because even at the end of the episode, when Janeway is fully aware that future Harry like ruined his life to help save them.
Yeah.
It's not like she
seems like he could have at least made Lieutenant Junior great.
Yeah, she could have opened up a little box and saying like, I think you've earned this.
Yeah, I know.
With the little pips, he could have his new pips.
He got a Vulcan children's choir, but it didn't
what do you got to do?
He had antimatter fireworks. Yeah, I don't know. He he was just backpedaling the shit he fucked up in the first place, I guess. But he did a good job of it. He was like, because she was like, how did Harry talk to? That's Janeway.
I was gonna confirm.
It was like, how did Harry talk to Seven in her brain? I
usually stick to coffee.
And it was because she had 15 years to figure out how to mine her cranial implants. Her cranial. Speaking of coffee, that dinner.
What the fuck are you talking about? Are you talking about 7 of 9's cranial implants?
Because he taught future Harry talked to her by giving her the code, the message, not the codes, but the instructions. And Janeway was like, "How did he do that?" And it was. Sorry, I'm like laughing as I'm saying it. I don't know why. And future Harry's like had 15 years to figure out how to talk to her cranial implants, but past Harry couldn't do that, and that's why Janeway's like, he must have figured it out or something, But but like it's like, how did he figure it out so fast?
Yeah.
I don't think she ever said that. She was just like, let's go for it. Like, he must have figured it out.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I think
it was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess he figured it out.
She trusts him implicitly, but will not promote him.
Nope.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
There's got to be a secret in Harry's closet.
Yeah.
There's something that Janeway knows where she says, look, we're going to take care of you. We'll keep your clarinet polished, if you know what I mean. But you're not getting promoted. Tom Paris, he's going to get promoted, and he's a criminal.
He said
he's an actual criminal.
He said
He's in a military prison.
He said inertial damper alert. He said inertial dampers
instead of dampeners.
And instead of dampeners,
a long-going observation, not even a debate, just a mere observation.
And he said it twice.
The different usages, dampers and dampeners.
He said it twice. And you know what else? You want to know what else?
What's that? What else?
So like Janeway goes to Choquete. She goes, dinner plans. And I should stop doing this voice. This is such a dumb...
Dinner plans?
It makes the whole thing...
I'm Captain Janeway.
This makes the whole thing just such a train wreck dumpster fire. But she's a Choquete. She's Choquete, dinner plans, and he's like nothing special date with a replicator. She's like, cancel it. That's an order. They did the thing.
It's just her replicator instead.
By saying she said that's an order, and she did that thing, and it wasn't even being yelled at the person who's supposed to save their own life. It's like, smash me in the face with my 2x4 and stab me in the eyeball so you live. That's an order.
I understand the example, but not the example. if you get what I mean.
Wait, which example?
Okay, so I know this is something you've brought up before, and I agree with you, which is there's this issue sometimes where they're like, that's an order. You say you run down the hallway and get to safety. I'm staying here and I'll cover you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
That's an order.
You were so much more eloquent than I was when you said it.
Well, I was just trying to clear up the confusion because I knew what you meant, but on multiple episodes of the podcast, the example you've used is like, smash me in the face with a fucking board. That's an order.
Yeah.
I don't understand the scenario.
And stab me in the eye.
Stab me in the eye. That's a fucking order.
So you don't die. That's an order.
For some reason, stab me in the eye so you don't die.
That means that's
like my grandma used to say.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We didn't even mean to do that.
Yeah.
But but in a way, it made it a little better because it wasn't in some dire situation. Because they're always in a dire situation where like the captain has to order the person, like you said, to save their own life, and they'll die for them or whatever, or don't die, or it's the other way, and they're just the person's dying, and the captain says like, don't die on me. That's an order. It's always this dire situation, but this was totally casual.
And then the person dies, and they have to go fill out the fucking forms to write them up and put it on their permanent record.
Yeah, and it's like it's a mark on their permanent record now, and you can't get rid of that shit.
It's just
they're dead.
It's not always fair, but that's how things are done.
But she did it throwaway. Janeway did it throwaway, kind of like cancel it. That's an order. So I almost liked it, but I was still kind of like.
That's cute when Janeway does it, I think. In the scenario you describe.
Yeah, and there was also one more thing about like.
That's just like Columbo. You're just like Columbo with your one more thing.
So when they were using the interplexing beacon that was in Seven's head,
Technobabble.
Choquete was like, that'll tell us where to send the message. Now the hard part. We need to know when to send it. They did that thing where it's like they say, it's not where you go, it's when you go.
No matter where you go, there you are.
So they did the when is it? They did the that's an order, and they did one more thing that kicked off this conversation.
I want to know what Johnny Worcestershire thinks of 3. What was it? He was. It was the 3 Tumbler Lane or something.
It was in San Andes.
That was Rembrandt Hammerschmidt. That was this week's letter. Totally real letter writer.
It was the triumvirate. I'll try. Oh, the other example I wanted to bring up of like how they were winking at the audience about time travel is you mentioned it about how Janeway was saying to Harry Kim at the end, saying like, hey, don't worry about it, don't think about it, because it's just stupid time travel.
Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, he was because
what are you worried for? We're all in one piece. We got our coffee, we're fine.
It was because Harry Kim was talking about how future Harry sent back that message to him, and he was like, if I sent the message from the future and changed the past, then that future would no longer exist, so how could I have sent the message in the first place? And she's just like,
when will then be now?
Yeah. Right now. Soon. Oh, yeah. It's not yet. How many times did they say drive in this episode?
11.
3.
Jesse, 12.
12. Oh,
they said drive a lot.
Yeah, well, they said quantum 11 times.
Quantum drive,
and they said 12.
Slipstream drive.
Because they usually said quantum
drive.
and drive in the same
Yeah,
sentence.
so what? I'm curious when they said it. Oh,
get in the driver's seat.
Okay, so the one time they. Wait a second.
The one time.
It wasn't the.
Yeah, Dan's analyzing his notes.
No, it's not the one time. There's a couple times because they also say quantum slipstream drive. They say slipstream drive. They say slipstream drive. Then they say just
affirmative.
Jesse, kick Dan in the shin.
He's skipping.
Then they just say drive sometimes.
The drive. Okay, now tell me this. Why did they have to? I know why. I know why they did this. But why did they have to steal the Delta Flyer as opposed to just taking any other ship? Did I miss in my 2 viewings a Technobabble reason why it had to be the Delta Flyer? Because I don't remember that.
I don't think so.
So wait, okay, that makes me think back to maybe if I misspoke earlier. When they were in the past, was that the Delta Flyer they were using?
So they got home in the Delta Flyer, and then I guess it was in a museum or something, and then they stole it back. And
maybe it had one of them Talaxian fuzz beetles on it.
Oh yeah, that was
which, by the way, didn't work.
No.
Right? Wasn't it supposed to bring good luck?
Yeah,
Besides
it was.
being awful and terrifying, and
Maybe it's what caused the variance.
it could have done it. Yeah.
Whoa, they should make
They should have an entire prequel series.
or a spin-off. Yeah, it's a prequel
Focused
spin-off
on this.
series.
Some space creep gives you a fuzzy bug. Don't take it.
Did you notice that was
Shove it in the engine.
Did you notice that was Neelix's star scene in this episode?
Yeah.
Like it was like his only scene and his most sort of like weird scene because Tuvok's all like, "You are an ending source of astonishment."
An unending
Right.
source of astonishment.
Yeah,
And
unending.
Neelix's great response. Oh, thank you, Mr. Vulcan.
Yeah, right. So yeah, and I guess that was Tuvok's only appearance. So I guess Tuvok had less of a role. Did he know? He must have been in the bridge, like saying some shit, like during when.
I think he
bit.
in the background. Do you know who wasn't in this episode? Tuvix.
Oh, you're right.
He's dead because Janeway killed him.
Yeah, she killed the fuck out of him.
She did. She killed the fuck right out of him.
Yeah,
He had a little bit of fuck, killed it right out of him.
but that was Neelix's only role in that episode.
Yeah.
You know, Harry calls Seven a drone at one point. Isn't that kind of fucked up?
I thought that was fucked up.
Yeah.
I was like, is that what they were calling?
Wait, Harry or Tom?
No, Harry.
Harry called it, yeah.
Because when she was drunk, he was
Yeah.
saying something like, "Looks like the drone can't hold her booze," or I don't know what he said.
the drone.
Something.
Maybe-
He said
maybe
He called her the
his-
drone.
Maybe his deep-seated racism.
I thought that
is
was
what
that was effed.
He's like
that's
O'Brien.
prevented him from getting
Lieutenant.
promoted.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Sorry,
can
I'm
see that.
Laughing breathily into the microphone.
Oh, he's racist. he's racist.
Yeah, I could overload the quantum matrix.
woke. It's racist. Sorry, that's more of a Deep Space Nine.
You just overloaded my quantum matrix when you said that.
All right. Well,
I need Harry to try to invert the quantum field in order to save it.
I need Harry to stop inverting his clarinet at night.
Nah.
I can't do a clarinet sound.
They play that
You can
too.
do that. You can do that on a clip.
Good now.
He'll try to.
That's a trumpet.
He'll try to.
Some sort of brass.
He'll try to invert the quantum field and to fix it
Invert this, Harry.
to fix it. He's gonna defix it.
because
It got broken.
Because the quantum matrix, the only way, because one way to prevent the quantum matrix from overloading is to try to invert the quantum field.
I've heard that's true.
It's a one-way trip to quantum matrix land. But again, I just the Delta
Today, Junior.
the
man.
Delta Flyer, they did not.
That was a hack joke I just did.
Yeah, I usually do it to you. So. The Delta Flyer, they did not need to steal the Delta Flyer. They could have taken any ship, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Oh yeah. it's true. Right. So
I mean, I know sets.
Those are the only two ships in the show.
So-
That's it.
It's just in the context of the plot. It's like we're in trouble because A and B and C, and like it's like you'd be in less trouble if you and the mission would have been more straightforward if you didn't have to at some point steal the Delta Flyer as well as stealing the Borg stuff.
So
Let us know if we were missing something and they had some offhand explanation about the Delta Flyer having some cool shit that helped them steal
maybe
shit. but
maybe they were just like, we like this old girl, and they like called it a
it's
girl and like treated it
seems
like a
ridiculous.
girl.
Maybe because
like a
it has a slipstream drive. If you
Do they need the
it won't
machines to
take so
get
long to
the-
wander around the Delta Quadrant.
No,
again?
it's just
but it
because
doesn't have a slipstream drive. It was just in front.
Oh,
of
it was just
Voyager.
riding on them. Oh,
But it did have the equipment to like send it. I don't know. Maybe they needed the logs for it. I could buy that argument, but even then, they could download the logs and not.
No,
I don't know.
no,
It just.
they just like that noisy old gal.
Yeah, I know.
No, I mean future ships would be better anyway, right? Unless how much up? I mean, I guess you can keep retro.
think.
You can.
It's only 15
Is it called
years.
retro? Why is it called?
Especially if you're afraid of fucking Geordi LaForge screaming down your asshole, trying to blow you out of the sky.
I bet
but all
they're-
politely.
yeah.
Why is the charges of conspiracy going to be dropped? Geordi was going to drop their charges of conspiracy.
What about the charges for treason?
Yeah, okay, there was that. But why is he going to, because they were successful at being right, he's like, okay, we'll drop your
Starfleet
conspiracy.
does negotiate with
What
terrorists.
about
Yeah.
inappropriate relationships with your junior?
No, that's where you take inaprovaline for. That's why the doctor has endless stores of
Jane-
inaprovaline.
So
If
Captain
something
LaForge,
inappropriate
he's
happens, it's like a
taking-
forget-me-not.
Forget me not.
That Joe Bluth is always, the roofies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Future
Well,
roofies.
When Janeway had,
Endemic in Starfleet.
what about when Janeway was having dinner with Choquete? That was they have an unprofessional relationship.
I don't think it was unprofessional.
Yeah, at the end she put her hand on his face like I want to cuddle with you,
I mean, they are like they've been together for 4 years. I get what you're saying. I think the context is
okay. So
Janeway should fuck Choquete.
Yeah, well, so they've been in the Delta Quadrant for 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days,
and they're on that planet that one time.
So is this before? That's what I was getting to. Is in these 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days? Is this before or after they go to that planet and have sex?
I feel like it's before, but I can't remember. I think it's before.
Vegetable biryani.
Yes.
Yeah, word up.
How many times did they say Slipstream in this episode?
8.
13.
29.
Oh, I know. I should have picked a larger number. I'm so dumb.
It was a lot larger than I expected.
How many times did they use the word the?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me count really quick. Let me like look at the screen and just soak it in. I would say maybe around 317, give or take.
Yeah, don't do that face.
Are you using some kind of word counting program?
I am using my ability to look at things and use my brain. You can't fucking do it.
He just told you to go fuck yourself, Jesse.
Yeah, you need. You know what you need? You need.
He schooled you.
You need South.
He totally curried me.
I did curry you right across the room. Stop lunching. You're a lunchbox because you're lunching so hard.
I was lunching over the Choquete and Tessa situation because I understand 100% why they added in the Tessa character.
Somebody had to beam him up and beam him down.
Well, because they had Harry's motivation of the guilt. Choquete had no guilt because he was like, you shouldn't do this.
But you
in the first place.
But you had to say Choquete's role was to show the emotional state of what it's like, sort of dealing with like. It seems like. Plus, he kind of moved the action along a little bit.
Part of the issue, I think, with the Tessa thing, in addition to
because
Harry was.
I'm sorry, because Harry was being emotional too. They were both giving emotional states, but Harry was more telling the story.
And it was very clear. We saw what was going on. He was guilty about a very specific thing, whereas Choquete, the way they set it up, you would have expected. I knew it wasn't going to happen, obviously, but. It seemed like they were setting up that maybe Choquete would waver and maybe at like the last minute he wouldn't want to do the plan or something. It seemed like they were trying to set something up like that to give him a motivation to not want to change the past by giving him this relationship. Instead, it seemed that I guess their intention was more about showing what Choquete was willing to give up.
Yeah.
Which is similar to the Edith Keeler Kirk thing in City on the Edge of Forever.
So
it's a little artificial.
Right. So when I said what I said about the emotion in Choquete, I was thinking specifically of the scene between him and Tessa where they're on the ship and they're the second time. Yeah. And she, she gives some like lines where I was like, that was the scene I was thinking of specifically because that was kind of like him sort of divulging, what was going on inside of his gut. So
it works. It doesn't necessarily work as well as it could have, and so in a weird way can potentially detract from it because you have to start to think, well, what would they have filled that time in otherwise? Would they have done something else with Choquete? Did Choquete even need to be there necessarily? Could have this had simply been a Harry Kim story?
And with the doctor there.
Yeah, and Harry Kim's doing this on his own, which is...
That's a good point.
In some ways more believable, that a lone... guilt-driven person would go, as opposed to Choquete, who they try to set up his motivation with Tessa saying, like you mentioned earlier, your heart is here and all this. It's like, okay.
I kind of want to watch it a third time now and just pay attention to Choquete because, the more I think about it, and the more I listen,
vision.
The more I listen to you say that, I'm just thinking, I don't really can't. Now that I think of it, I can't put my finger down.
Well,
on
wouldn't
Choquete.
you know it? This is a productive conversation.
That's
audience. Take note.
Take note of that.
This is worthwhile listening.
It doesn't change the fact that Tessa was sort of his target of his expression, and the doctor was Harry's target of his expression. When I was watching this episode, because I really, like I said, I was captivated by this episode, engrossed and captivated. I mean, it was a good episode. It was a decent episode. It wasn't amazing, but it surprised me how interested I was, and I never felt like, oh, this is pretty good, but I'm kind of bored. Which is different than how I felt with the Tuvix episode, because the Tuvix episode is classic. It's it's a legendary Voyager episode. Legendary. But I was bored through about half of it because and I think I don't know what it was, but even as Tessa was kind of wooden and not and kind of a weird Like, what are you doing?
Very young for Robert Beltran, which I think is the Rick Berman.
Oh,
you know,
influence,
the very, very young. No, nothing against it, but it's weird.
Yeah, so
especially because it was old. It was like aged up. Sorry, I'm just sorry. It's aged up Robert Beltran. He's got like gray in his hair, and then he's got this very young woman, and he's like, "Oh, should I keep all my friends dead in the past,
right? So
I can keep having sex with this very, very young woman."
That good point. That aside,
we'll set that aside.
We'll put that in a little box.
Yeah, that observation. Shunted over here.
Shunted.
Not forgotten.
It's stented. It's merely you put a stent and you shoved it in there.
Placed gently in the corner. To be retrieved whenever necessary.
What I was trying to say was that basically the scenes between Tuvix and Kes were like really boring, I thought. But the scenes between Choquete and Tessa, as kind of silly as I thought they were still entertaining me. I wasn't bored.
Yeah.
That's the thing is...
And they were concise.
Yeah, and even with all the exposition, I wasn't bored. Even with Harry's over-delivery of like some of these lines, I wasn't bored.
The episode moves. It's well-paced.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the thing. I think that's what it is it's well-paced, whereas... the Tuvix episode kind of lingered too long or something, you know, and it's a good episode. The best part of it is really the last 15 minutes. That's like when it gets like fucking like, oh shit. But the rest is fine. But you know,
You're talking about Tuvix, right?
Yeah, Tuvix. The rest is fine. And it does build to a point, but it's like this, for some reason I was like, wow, I'm into this.
Tuvix would have benefited from the era where you could do short treks. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's there are a lot of stories like that, you know, sometimes they can be two-parters, but sometimes a short trek might be the way to go. And even with the two-parters, it can be problematic because, as we've noted before, there are a number of two-part episodes, even really good two-part episodes, where they weren't really a two-part episode. They were like a 1.5 part episode, so they end up having to add a bunch of filler. And I do think that as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that I can't remember if it was Brandon Braga or who was that's what they were concerned about, you know, with the argument that this should be stretched into 2 episodes. The concern was that you'd end up putting a lot of filler in, and I think there's already a little bit of filler in as it stands in terms of sort of the technobabble and some of the Tessa stuff. It's fine. It's all entertaining. It's well paced, but I agree with you. I wasn't bored by any of it. Thoroughly entertained by it.
Yeah, if the Choquete and Tessa stuff went on longer, it would have probably gotten pretty boring and irritating.
It gets bonus points because they got LeVar Burton to, you know, do a cameo as Geordi LaForge as a captain, which is pretty cool. And you know, LeVar Burton was already assigned to direct it. It was the 100th episode, and according to Memory Alpha, they sought him out to direct this episode, and it was only a little bit before, I think, even shooting the episode that they kind of decided, they reached out and they said, hey, would you be willing to do a cameo? Because we have this one part where our captain's chasing, it would be cool. And so he agreed to do that, which was fun. It's, you know, Voyager was good for, you know, having some good cameos of Star Trek people. So I think that aspect of it was pretty cool. They do a good thing of making things cold. By the way, this is starting to sound like odds and ends. Do you think we're doing odds and ends?
We're about at odds and ends.
Have we smoved into odds and ends?
Yeah, I think we've covered all the bulk parts of the story. If not, feel free to toss them in, because I was just going to mention as an odd and end that, especially at the beginning, they do a really good job of making everyone look like super cold. And then I'm thinking about it, I'm like, those people must be fucking miserable because they're not in snow. They're wearing these giant, horrible, like really warm looking jackets. And I'm sure there are studio lights, but I was impressed. I'm always impressed with the production design of Star Trek. Pretty much no matter the era, there's some mistakes here and there, some goofiness here and there, but you know, for 1998, I was like, "Ooh, that looks cold."
Yeah, it was a nice looking glacier.
Yeah, I was reminded when you were saying that of something Pete Holmes said on his show or something, where he was saying like, to his guests, he's like, I don't like watching movies or shows where people look cold, and so And so, but like it was a good point because I was watching it, and when you are convinced that someone's cold, yeah, it's kind of miserable. It's just like picturing what that's like. Because man, I've been cold, but I've never been that cold, and it sucks to be cold. Like I can tolerate it. I'm like I run cold, so I hate heat, because I've always been like kind of like a big dude, big boned dude, and I just got anyways, I always ran hot. But the point I'm making is now that I'm telling you all about my
episode 69,
my childhood
big boner dude,
my childhood weight problems. What was I getting at? Oh yeah, I was saying that
you're talking about you don't like being cold, even though you run cold.
Yeah, or I run cold, and I hate being hot, but being cold I can tolerate. But I've been really cold. And
I've been so cold, man.
And I was like,
how cold was it?
I mean,
man, it was cold. It was like Mars, man.
It was marzipan. So I was cold and it sucked, and I was like, how do people get colder than that? And when you see it on the TV or movie, I can understand. It's like, man, like that's kind of like fucked up, and I don't like thinking about it, but it's impressive, so that's cool.
I want to know why Harry Kim slapped the doctor's shoulder so hard at one point. He's all like slapping it, and he like really slapped it hard. There's all this sinister stuff under the surface of Harry Kim. Like, does he have a beef with the doctor?
Didn't the doctor slap him on the shoulder back right before Harry Kim killed him? Like, like to use his energy
to deactivate him.
Yeah, he had to deactivate him.
Yeah, but not as hard. Now he didn't like reel back and just slap him in the shoulder.
Well, B'Elanna hit Harry. Yeah, she hit Harry too, didn't she? When she said, but not as hard as Harry hit the EMH.
I don't know. Maybe who knows? Maybe some like weird behind the scenes thing.
He was pissed off at him. This was awesome when Starfleet's coming up and Harry Kim's like talking to the doctor. He's like, if you're having doubts, let me know. I'll take your program offline, but if you're with us, we tempt fate together. And then the doctor goes, to aid an honorable thief or to spend eternity in cybernetic oblivion. Then he goes, let's tempt fate. That was that was like poetry, man. Not to sound cheesy, like that was awesome. That deserves to be like in the anal holes of time.
And I also think another example of that.
It's timeless.
He said the name.
Oh, that's the name of the episode.
But the scene where Choquete is talking with Captain LaForge is similar in the sense that both of those exchanges convey the idea that both positions are valid positions. This is not an easy or. Obviously, we are in the position as the audience to root for Harry, Elder Harry and Elder Choquete. But LaForge's point of view is eloquently noted. It makes perfect sense that Starfleet would be like, yeah, we can't have you just like fucking around in time. And I also like that Choquete and LaForge were really polite with each other. They both respected each other's position. LaForge even said, look, if I was in your position, I'd probably be doing the same thing. And Choquete was like, yeah, so you know the deal. I got to try this. And they're both like, all right, good luck.
It helps that it's LeVar Burton in that role, because it's easy to look at some crusty old admiral or something. I mean, he was a captain, but just what I mean. Like, there's so many times you see of Starfleet, and they seem like, oh, that asshole. They're good because they're whatever, but they're being an asshole right now, or maybe they're corrupt, or I don't know. But like when it's Geordi LaForge, it helps you sort of see the middle ground a bit more.
It's all comfy. And it's very Star Trek-y. It's Voyager was always good at doing proper Star Trek style vibes, as Star Trek is generally good at. But I thought it's nice because sometimes the good guys and bad guys are very clearly delineated. Sometimes it turns out to be like a miscommunication or something. But this was one of those instances, I should say, where you have two valid viewpoints that make sense from each of the perspectives. So even if you're rooting for one or the other, it's not like you hate that other person. It's like if you hate them, it's just because they're making valid, strong arguments against your position. It's kind of on either side of it.
It's kind of like the evolution of the WWE. There was always. Do
you mean from when the F turned into an E?
Starting at the F, but pre.
Because all they did was they just added that bottom shit.
Yeah, you're right. They added that bottom shit.
added
Becomes
that bottom-
WWE.
You add the bottom shit, and now your WWF becomes WWE.
They could have easily turned that F into a T, for example.
Yeah, the
Or-
WWT.
or-
The
or
other
a
way.
P.
Or even a P would have been
Yeah.
easier than
If they
a
wanted
T.
to go fucking nuts, they could have had a little slashy thing and made it an R.
Yeah, they could have.
WWR.
Yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth. And the letters.
WWR.
Well, it was back in the WWF when it was the F. You'd have your superstars versus the jabronis, right?
Yeah.
And then nowadays it's kind of like, you might like one wrestler, you might like the other. It's not so cut and dry.
All a bunch of jabronis.
Although I haven't watched wrestling in probably fucking 15 years, so I don't even know. But that's kind of how the direction went. So I'm assuming it's
You're
the same.
extrapolating at this point.
I'm extrapolating. But I can speak from experience about how it was at one point that I vaguely paid attention to it. I saw it go in that direction because, so I extrapolated. I derived that. I extrived. No. How long does it take to go a parsec? If you're in a starship?
Depends on how fast you're going.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Fuck you.
What is your velocity, sir? What is your velocity?
Well, they were saying they got within a few parsecs of the Alpha Quadrant. That's while they were still flying, and then they got knocked out, and they're not flying anymore. And they say, "Hey, we've gone 10 years."
they meant from the start.
From the no, there are a few parsecs from the Alpha Quadrant from when they stopped. That's when they were a few parsecs from the Alpha Quadrant.
You're forgetting. You're forgetting one key point. There's two different. There's one is after the intervention. So in other words,
I think she said it like while during their flight.
When they crash,
or pairs,
when
or
they
someone.
crash and die, is when they are very near the Alpha Quadrant.
Okay.
When that is prevented, they are still very far from the Alpha Quadrant, but because Harry sent the wrong code to disrupt the slipstream, that was way before they would have crashed. So they advanced 10 years from where they had started before they got into all this nonsense, but because they didn't get all the way to the Alpha Quadrant, in other words. They just went a little bit of the ways and then fell out.
So what you're saying...
They were nowhere near that ice planet when they actually came out of the slipstream.
Okay, so what you're saying...
second time.
So what you're saying is... Okay, I remember... Okay, and let me finish here. I remember when they said... Someone said we are a few parsecs from the Alpha Quadrant while they were flying. Now, what you're contending is that I'm thinking that got said at a different part in the episode.
It's related to the confusion of the structure.
Wait. So it's what you're saying is it was actually said in the point in time where they crashed into the shit and Harry didn't help them. And then that's when it was said, but I thought it was said when Harry had helped them, and that's not when it had.
He had tried to help them.
Yeah.
That's what my
confusion was, because if they were saying they were, but I mean, I don't know how long it takes to go a few parsecs anyway.
A parsec is 3.26 light years. So
pretty far. It's not small.
So if you were traveling at the speed of light, then it would take you 3.
The intention was to convey that when they...
That's a good point.
The original timeline...
Thank you, Jesse.
The original timeline where they crash...
It's about 30 trillion kilometers.
I mean,
at the end of it, before they crash on the planet, if they hadn't crashed, they would be awesome.
Right, I get that.
They would have been like almost as far as... They were trying to get to Earth, they would have been... a little bit of ways from that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I understand now. I was thinking that the line was said at a different point in the episode.
The problem is that what they've done is clever, but it adds to the confusion in that you're watching this and you're like, okay, Harry's about to save the day. Okay, Harry's sending the message. Okay, everything's going to be cool. But then you're like thinking, wait a second, I haven't seen that cool scene of Voyager crashing yet that I saw in the commercial. So what's going on here? And then what happens is that Harry's solution doesn't work.
Right.
And then so we see them crash.
Yes.
And that, and then they do the reset. So in a sense, that was a clever storytelling move because it tricks you. You think the day is about to be saved and actually it's not yet. And it's going to be this other thing that saves the day.
That whole,
but it makes it confusing.
Right. That whole, sort of sequence was I thought it was cool because it tricks you in another way too, where it keeps going back and forth between the past and the future, and
you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, and
here,
it's like one shot is of Choquete and Tessa getting fucked up, and then it switches to like an establishing shot of that same ship.
Yes.
But now you're in the past because everything's chill, and my brain like for a second breaks as I'm like, wait, what's going on? So and it switches back and forth. I thought that was actually really cool how they did.
I respect
that because it was confusing at first, but then it makes sense after you watch it.
This episode is like a lot of things that came after, like take Memento, for example. It's where it's confusing because it's complicated, but when you take once you've analyzed all the pieces, it does fit together nicely. But it's going in different directions than expected. And I think that slows your brain down because your brain is all like, oh, they're going this way. And then it takes your brain a second to reset to figure out exactly what's going on because they're switching back and forth. And, you watch it a few times, you're like, oh, okay, all the pieces do work together, but, it takes some noodling through.
It's a concept that's been done before, but I thought it was just executed really well
Agreed.
in this episode. So.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, overall, I'm very positive about this episode, except for, the nitpicks, here and there.
Yeah.
Odds and ends.
Nooks and crannies.
There's
150. Someone said that there's 150 people on Voyager. I'm assuming
that was Thomas Edison.
That's
Thomas Alva Edison.
Not that many people on them.
They
153, 152.
Someone said 150. Now, if that was plus Harry and Choquete, that means there's 152 people on Voyager.
Yeah.
I remember this line.
Harry said 150.
Unless they were using a round number.
That's what I was thinking is maybe they're rounding. Yeah.
But
that's
Starfleet doesn't
silly.
like to.
I mean, it's military. Like, you'd think, or whatever, or close to it, they would be exact. It's
we lost 143 souls.
At 0620. Well, they don't say so.
0623.
Yeah, no one ever says 0623.
I'm sure something happens at 0623.
People die.
I think you're late.
Nooks and crannies.
Oh, here's one. Are you ready? Odds and ends. Brandon Bragger, by all accounts, he had this image of Voyager buried under ice, and that's all he had. He had that image in his mind, and he was like, "Fuck, that's awesome!" And then he told people about it, and then they sort of built this story around that image. So that initial image you see with, as apparently in the script, it said, we reveal that the USS Voyager is buried under tens of meters of ice.
Tens of meters.
20
meters, according to the Doctor.
Odds and ends.
That's like in Back to the Future, right? How they made it based around the idea that they like the idea of a kid making out with his mom or whatever. Odds and ends. Patrick just was nodding his head. He's like, yeah, Dan. Just like it.
Nice. Episode 69.
Nice. I kept noticing the fucking tricorder things that get plugged into stuff. It was so sparkly with all its lights. Do you notice how sparkly the Harry's fucking...
The future tricorder was the same as the contemporaneous tricorder.
Yeah. They just go with what works. I mean, and you use that thing at the very end of the episode. He used that thing to like plug into this huge laptop that's from the future, but it's bulkier than what was 10 years in our past. And he's like taking this giant flashing tricorder and he
talk about getting confused.
And he plugs this giant tricorder into this bulky giant laptop to play a sound file.
Well, it's got to be space rated. Space rated equipment. You need some thick titanium. I don't know.
In case it gets, it's on a console and the console explodes, it needs to be able to be resistant.
You need to have bricks. You have to have these black bricks inside of all the equipment so that when it explodes, bricks can rain, like chunks of brick.
That's ridiculous.
Can rain down on
stupid.
people.
That's stupid.
Well, yeah, write a letter to Star Trek.
I'll write a letter to you.
Dear Star Trek, you're stupid.
Odds and ends. Originally, they wanted to have the teaser and the first act be completely dialogue free. It's interesting you talk about the exposition issues because, and it might be a little bit related to this, they didn't go that far in the end. They decided they had no choice but to have a certain amount of dialogue, but they did keep it to a minimum. And when you learn that and then you go back and watch it, it is kind of interesting that there's this long stretch where it's not that there's no dialogue, but it is fairly minimal to what you're used to seeing on that kind of thing.
One of them says something when they're outside in the snow, but you don't really. It's like,
US Voyager. That's the USS Voyager. It's under tons of meters of ice.
I didn't. The first time I watched it, I didn't figure out that it was Voyager until they went inside and saw dead crew members. It was until they saw Janeway, because I was like just
Dead Paris.
I was staring at the cold open as it was zooming out to show you that it was Voyager under the ice, and my brain just didn't put it together because I was just kind of zoning out at the picture, and I was like, I totally didn't put together that it. Even though like the second viewing, I was like, this is incredibly obvious that this is the Voyager under the ice, and I missed it. So I'm like, what is this? What is this unit they're in that's covered in snow? And then I saw like they even passed Paris, and I still didn't put it together. And then they saw
unit.
and they
Episode 69 of the podcast.
fucking punchy, man.
Unit.
That's what I call a cold opening.
And it wasn't until they went to Janeway that I noticed, and that was just all I was saying was it was zoned out. But then you made me
I didn't.
You made me
I was not
self-conscious.
saying-
You made me
shouldn't be
self-conscious.
No, I was making a childish joke about units.
Yeah, you couldn't wait till the. Never mind. It doesn't
Of course
matter.
I couldn't wait. What do you expect?
No.
What do you expect? This is not I'm not known for self-control. According to Memory Alpha, this episode has one of the few examples of an on-screen mention of the Beta Quadrant.
The Beta Quadrant.
The Beta Quadrant.
The doctor needs an isoprobe, which is a skull.
Yeah, and inaprovaline.
All I have written here is no damage to the infrastructure, but the doctor needs an isoprobe, and then parentheses I have skull.
It's kind of fucked up. They're like, oh, she's very well preserved. Let's just tear pieces of her head off,
Yeah, with her eyeball.
and we'll help her.
So Beta Quadrant. So do they talk about what's the other quadrant? There's the Alpha, Beta, Gamma.
The alpha, beta,
How often do they
delta,
talk about the
gamma.
Gamma Quadrant?
Well, you know,
That's
Deep
in
Space
Deep
Nine.
Space Nine.
It's all over the place.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's where they're going.
where the
with-
wormhole goes.
I'm so stupid.
It's okay, Dan.
It's the Gamma Quadrant. I'm so stupid. Is the Gamma Quadrant the Gamma Quadrant closer than the Delta Quadrant?
Depends on where you are.
Fuck you, man. Depends how fast you're going.
Should they?
It's not where you are, it's when you are.
They should have would it have been faster if they went to the Gamma Quadrant and popped through the wormhole back to the Alpha Quadrant? Or,
The wormhole.
or they were
Wormhole.
just trying to go from Delta to Alpha.
If they
It's
pulled
like, we gotta go that way.
if they pulled a Yui through the wormhole,
No, it ain't no Yui. They just pop over to the Gamma Quadrant.
yeah, I don't know. You'd have that's space aeronautics, man.
Yeah, I know.
You just
right?
just pop over to the Gamma Quadrant.
It's like when
Pop there and back.
What's like when the airplane flies across the Earth to
On a happy jump.
when the airplane flies across the Earth, it doesn't go a straight path. It like goes up and then down, goes north and then south, or south and north, because the Earth's all round and the equator is a thing that exists, right?
And gravity, too.
Yeah,
Don't forget about gravity.
Don't forget.
Going through the wormhole is like you go to the Gamma Quadrant because you can get cigarettes cheaper. Like the founders.
That's stupid.
The founders are like, they don't charge tax on
There's
cigarettes.
no sales tax.
Yeah, there's no sales tax on the founders' homeworld. You just get covered in goo and have visions, like weird.
They sometimes disguise themselves as cigarettes and then pop out when you're trying to smoke one. And you're like, "Jeez, why'd you do that?"
Cheesy peasy. All
Trying
right.
to smoke a
We need to
cigarette.
know when to send it. Interplexing.
Any other odds and ends? Dan's always got a few bonus odds and ends. Before we start talking about the where you can write us letters. Real listeners can write us real letters.
Harry and Choquete were in the Takara sector, just outside the Alpha Quadrant in the future. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this was interesting. So, well, not interesting, just kind of like it was one of these things that doesn't matter, but you're kind of like, why? It's along the lines of why the Delta Flyer could handle the phase variance, but the Voyager couldn't. So at one point, Harry says auto navigation is like, they were talking about like, why can't we use auto navigation? He's like, because some of these things require less than 2 seconds time to compensate. Yeah. And what you're saying is a human can do better than a computer to compensate. Yeah. Automatic transmissions in cars are often thought to be better than manuals now. That's what a lot of people assert, is that almost everybody asserts who's in the know about these kinds of things.
What about
automatic transmission cars are probably about equal in fuel efficiency to manual, because way back the advantage of manual is because, a human was better than the algorithm that the automatic transmission used. You could get better fuel mileage. Now they're saying it's about equal. A lot of people assert that automatics might even be better than manuals. And so all I'm saying is the auto navigation, if it can't handle 2 seconds of time, how is a human going to do it? That's all I'm saying.
What is your view view?
That's all I'm saying.
What is your
That's
view
all I'm saying.
on autoerotic,
I'm not saying anything. I'm just
autoerotic
saying.
asphyxiation?
I don't.
Do you have a view on that?
I don't do it, but I'm all for it.
All right. That's a fair. Me too. I'm right there.
Just
Right
be
there.
careful,
I'm in a
man.
similar
Just be
position.
careful. Just be careful. That's all I say.
You don't want
'Cause
to
it-
end up like that guy or that other guy.
Kung Fu. Yeah.
Yeah. The Kung Fu. David Carradine.
Yeah.
Kung Fu: The Legend Continues.
David
Or,
Carradine.
the fellow. What was it? In Excess or whatever.
Michael Hutchins.
I forget. The other people. Yeah. Be careful out there, folks. Be careful out there, folks, with the autoerotic asphyxiation. Be careful with the automatic navigation. You got to trust your computers. Harry Kim, this is why you didn't get promoted.
A Talaxian furfly, an old spacefaring tradition among my people. If one of these creatures stowed away on your ship, it was a sign of good fortune. I had this little fellow preserved. He hung in my engine room for 6 years.
So,
Disgusting.
if folks are interested and are fans of Voyager,
I never said I was good at doing voices. I make voices up, but imitating voices, I'm
if
not,
you're
you know.
if you're into Voyager, there is the project, the Voyager documentary project going on, and you can find them on social media at the Voy Documentary. I think that's definitely Twitter. Probably works elsewhere too. I only mention it because we commented about how one issue with Voyager. And I also find it's true of Deep Space Nine that the viewing on streaming is subpar.
Like I said, it's streaming. You see the blocks,
the blocks, the
streaming,
pixels.
the dithering blocks or
It's
whatever.
A lot of other shows, when you're watching them on streaming,
I mean,
it's
I'm not
better than when you saw them on TV. This is the reverse.
Yeah, when I say blocks, I mean like big.
Yeah.
Fucking when you look close, you can see
big
these
goofy
big-
because they compress the fuck
Yeah,
out of it.
yeah,
and I think
compression, right.
and they probably are using transfers that were originally made for DVD, so they're already not great to begin with.
DVD's nuts.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why I bring that up is because the Voyager documentary folks, who also worked on some of the previous cool Star Trek related documentaries, I think they did a Spock related one. I'm forgetting the title of it, and I think they worked on the Deep Space Nine one. But they did a fundraising. One of the, I forget which fundraising thing. You can look on their social media to find out, or just type in Voyager documentary. But they far exceeded their initial funding estimates, and so now they're trying to actually start to crowdsource funding to attempt to put together an HD remaster of Voyager.
HD's nuts.
Now, we don't need to go into all the details. There's a lot of details online as to what the complications are as to why Deep Space Nine and Voyager
These tails nuts.
have not been remastered in HD, and it's related to how they were produced. They were produced slightly differently than TNG and the original series, and of course Enterprise and Beyond. It was all filmed in HD anyway.
Enterprise and beyond.
So we're good to go there. I would prefer a Deep Space Nine HD remaster between the two, because for me that would be super awesome. But I'm really excited about the idea of if they can get something moving on that, because it would be so wonderful and so much more pleasurable to watch these shows in a just an enhanced format. It doesn't have to be 4K or nothing necessarily. It's just something that doesn't have, as Dan noted, a bunch of fucking blocks jumping out at the screen at you, no matter what service you're viewing it through.
Mm-hmm. It's a bummer. And watching the original series,
It's all beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. It looks really good.
Totally.
When Bailana smashed that bottle, if I did that, I'd be afraid I'd cut myself. You know what I mean?
That was a really messy thing to do, next to the quantum slipstream drive.
Yeah, you'd think it would be
even next to like the warp core.
Isn't that one of those?
Or lots of places on a spaceship you just don't want to be smashing glass.
Yeah,
Isn't that one of those
filled with
traditions that's
liquid.
like weirdly young? Like I can't remember, but there's all these things that we think are like, oh, we do it because we've done it for 1,000 years. It's
like
no.
a 20th century thing.
Yeah, I think it might be a 20th century thing, because the idea of smash. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's harkens back to ancient times, but I don't know. It just feels.
I doubt it.
It feels like there's other ways to celebrate.
I bet you people have cut their fingers and severed tendons in their fingers and had to go and get surgery.
Or it bounces off and smashes in their face. And they get facial
because
lacerations.
It doesn't break. I can't remember what movie it was. They were trying to break. It was some comedy movie. They were trying to break the
Was it
champagne.
Face Off? They get facial
that
lacerations.
comedy movie. Face Off.
Facial
lacerations.
We saw that in theaters.
If you think autoerotic asphyxiation is fucked up, you don't want to be dealing with no facial lacerations, because
No.
that face will bleed.
No, so there was some comedy where they were trying to break it and it wouldn't break. Maybe it was even a cartoon. But what was funny is that Janeway, because Janeway was like, we're going home, and she was all happy about it. And then
She had confetti in her hair.
Every time Dan does his Janeway voice, he's also doing jazz hands.
yeah. So
That's why we got to start doing a video podcast.
So at the end, she makes a joke. She goes, "Go easy on that champagne, Lieutenant." Talking to Torres. What's funny about that is you think she's talking about, don't drink all the champagne and get drunk. But what she's really saying is she's like, go easy on it. You smashed the shit out of it last time.
Yeah.
That's what she's really saying.
Yeah. Don't get,
I'm going to drink that champagne.
Yeah, man. She's like, she's not worried about her getting drunk and not being able to hold her liquor. She's worried about getting her own.
Neelix is going to get some glass in the eye.
Sneaky Marquis taking all the champagne.
For real. That's what I'm talking about.
All right.
Wait, how many times did they say Matrix in this episode?
8.
4.
Did I get it?
You got it.
I'm getting better at this.
He's much better at this than
He
I am.
didn't even guess on Quantum. He was like, I don't even know, man.
I don't
Or
even
was
have
it
an
Drive? It might have been Drive.
All right.
Last
one.
Better be the last one. We got to stop doing this.
Antimatter.
Gotta stop.
This is the last one. Antimatter.
Antimatter.
2.
8.
1.
Fuck.
Oh, it's close.
See, I had to put a bow on it. Okay, I'm done.
You did. No, and it's a beautiful bow. It's a beautiful bow. It's like when you go to jail and then you come back from jail.
He's talking about stopping.
And you're on the bus, and you told the girl,
You're on the bus.
you told the girl that if she still loves you, she should tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. And lo and behold, your bus gets there. You're so nervous.
Nobody
the whole
came
bus
to
is
pick
nervous.
you up at the bus.
The whole bus is nervous for you, and lo and behold, there are 100 yellow ribbons tied around that old oak tree.
This guy is talking about stopping and how it's urgent we stop, and he goes on a soliloquy over there.
This guy is talking about Tony Orlando.
Talking about some kind of Tony Orlando
Tony
song
Orlando.
from the 70s.
Tie a yellow
or
ribbon
something.
around the old oak tree.
Yeah,
But
well, you know what I mean.
that'll do it for us. The last bits are social media. Where do you find us on social media, Dan?
Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You can do at It's Got Star Trek.
At It's Got Star Trek. If you want to be one of our increasingly popular segment, totally real listener letters, just you can email us at feedback.
So real.
Feedback at itsgotstartrek.com.
Unbelievably real.
The website's embedded in there. You can check out the website for all sorts of extra bonus stuff.
Loose thread. Whatever happened to Wesley Crusher? Who cares?
Yeah, that's another one. That is an interesting.
I love it. Loose thread. Who cares?
Basically, Picard got super disappointed at him, and that was it. Like things were different.
Yeah,
And,
the last episode, he Wesley Crusher really changed everyone's opinion of him, and it was kind of depressing.
Well, he came back, and there was that whole where he was trapped with Picard in that cave with the asshole, and they're trying to get the water.
Yeah.
And then so there's that. And then he shows up. He's in Nemesis at the wedding.
Yeah, that's true.
Nemesis.
No, I'm a huge Will Wheaton fan. I really.
Oh, Will Wheaton rules.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But yeah, loose threads. But anyway,
Will Wheaton's cool, just not Wesley Crusher.
So It's Got Star Trek is the website. You can find us on YouTube if you're crazy. And you got the emails and all that. We don't know what we're talking about next week, but we will figure it out, and we'll put it on one of those social media things, and you will find out what we will be talking about next week. But we don't guarantee
even know.
It's going to be Star Trek related. It's going to be related to this
Star Trek
franchise called Star Trek.
Star Trek.
If you like the Star Trek.
If you like the stars, just give them some stars. So that'll do it from us this week. We'll talk about something Star Trek related next week. And until then,
Maybe we won't.
That'll do,
we
pig.
wish you a wonderful week, a wonderful and lovely,
Cromwell.
a cromulent week. Totally cromulent.
Yes, indeed.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
My contribution to the Slipstream drive.
Thanks. What is it?
A Talaxian fur fly. An old spacefaring tradition among my people. If one of these creatures stowed away on your ship, it was a sign of good fortune. I had this little fella preserved. He hung in my engine room for 6 years.
Cute.
Mr. Neelix, you are an unending source of astonishment.
Why, thank you, Mr. Vulcan.